Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for this Q4 Masterclass, the first in our series to prep you for the holiday season. We're live from Boston. We have a lot of expertise on the line for you today. We're partnering up with Channel Key, and we also have some of our experts online going to be answering your questions live. So keep your questions coming at all points during the webinar and let us know where you're dialing in from today. We'd love to hear from you. So our speakers today, I have in the room with me right now my colleagues Betsy and Caroline. I'm Gari, I'm the manager of product education here. You might have seen some articles that I've written in the past or encountered me in some of our onboarding videos. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to share a lot of information and knowledge with you. I'm joined by Betsy and Caroline.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for joining us. This is Betsy here. I'm on the customer success team. I work with hundreds of sellers that enter our products and help them figure out what strategy is going to work best to help them reach their business goals. So pretty interesting moving into Q4. We're going to be touching on a lot of those different strategies.
And I'm Caroline. I'm here in sales. This is my first webinar, so I'm super excited to be on it.
Woohoo! And we're so excited to have Brian on the line with us as well. Brian works at Channel Key, and he's the head of marketplace strategy there. Brian, do you want to tell our listeners what you get up to every day?
Yeah, sure. So as the head of marketplace strategy at Channel Key, I'm responsible for crafting how we implement our brand strategies on the Amazon Marketplace, what levers are available from an advertising standpoint, and really what brands should or shouldn't be doing.
Perfect. So we have so much exciting content to share with you guys today, but this works best if we're addressing your main concerns. So feel free to write your questions at any time. We do have a Q&A planned at the end, but you certainly don't have to wait until then to ask us about Q4 and sponsored product strategy. Great. So our webinar today is designed around actionable strategies for Q4. I think I already said Q4 30 times so far. I'll be saying it again. And we're trying to help you grow sustainably this quarter while keeping profitability in mind. Q4 tends to be more high volume, but we want to help you focus on the bottom line as well and your profitability. So leading into that, we have our agenda for today. So we're going to show you how to prep, how to execute, and how to evaluate performance. We had this set up based on when you should be taking each action. So we're going to take you through what your October looks like, what November looks like, December, and then going into Q1, January as well. And a lot of strategies around inventory, around advertising, so lots of good info there. So I'm going to let Betsy lead the way here. Betsy, set us up for Q4.
Yeah, so this was an interesting quote that I found on an e-commerce website where we're forecasting actually 17 to 22% increase in e-commerce sales for 2018 compared with 16% last year, all for the holiday season. So this is actually the same quote that we used last year for our kickoff to Q4 webinar. So I thought it was interesting that we could see even more growth into 2018.
Perfect. And then what's everyone's timeline going to be looking like for Q4?
Yeah, so we are just going to really the way that we're going to run this webinar is kind of touch upon all of the important dates and things that you guys are going to want to be aware of as we get closer to the holidays, as we progress through Q4. So doing your preparation work in October, getting ready for Black Friday and Cyber Monday through November, doubling down on your advertisements in December, and definitely keeping your performance expectations in mind all throughout Q4 and into Q1 2019.
Perfect. And then just to set a baseline and give you guys some benchmarks, we pulled some information from our own databases here just to show you what Q4 looked like last year for some of our sellers. So up top, you'll see, what the average performance was, and then down at the bottom, you'll see what the median performance was. And we wanted to highlight this because we have a mix of sellers online today. Some of you might be closer to that 1,500 ad spend range. Some of them, you might be closer to, 15,000 in ad spend. So based on where you fall, these are some of the average metrics you could see for performance, keeping in mind that this is across multiple categories, multiple types of sellers of all sizes. Any interesting highlights here, Betsy?
I just think it's interesting that our average customer is a lot different than our most common customer.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important actually to just show this data for those two different customer segments, for us to show what our lower volume sellers can expect to see out of Q4 compared to what a higher volume seller can expect, and making sure that you guys are aware of what is really going to happen as we move into progressing in Q4.
Yeah, it's interesting, the smaller sellers see a lower cost per click, so potentially less competition. However, A cost tends to be higher, so you have to spend more to get those sales as a smaller seller. So that's something important to keep in mind. That's a metric that comes up in every conversation. And keeping in mind that Q4 in general tends to be high traffic, high competition. There are a lot of new shoppers, but there are also a lot of new sellers and new advertisers. So that's important to keep in mind as you head into Q4. So the metrics, kind of make sense to me. You spend more, you get more impressions, which means you get more clicks, which means you convert better into orders.
Exactly.
So that kind of makes sense to me. Any words of caution, Brian, from your own experience last Q4?
Yeah, the main thing is to understand your product mix. Q4 does see a really large uptick, but not for every single seller.
Yeah.
So if you're selling something that's going to sell the same all year round, trash bags, paper towels, things like that, you're not going to expect to see quite an uplift as if you're selling apparel or shoes or something like that. So just be mindful of what your assortment is and what your expectations are for Q4.
That's actually a really interesting point that you bring up, Brian. One of the largest sellers that I work with is in the grocery category, and they actually see kind of the opposite happen in Q4, where a lot less sales, a lot less traffic comes in, because people are taking more time off and they're more likely to just go to the grocery store instead of when they're busy and order that stuff on Amazon.
Interesting. That's really important to keep in mind. So keep your product category in mind, keep your own seasonality in mind. And these are not, expected performance. This is just what we saw happened last time. Perfect. So let's dive into some strategies. So we're going to cover, like I said, inventory strategy, advertising, pricing, and going to help you set some expectations as well and how to project for your own business. But before we launch into what your October looks like and what strategies to implement, I'm going to launch our first poll of the day. So look for that to come up here in just a second. And we just want to know, have you started preparing for Q4? It's okay if you've not. That's why we're here. That's why we're providing this content. So just let us know if you've already started thinking about Q4, if we maybe sent you into panic mode. But we're going to give you some action items to take as well. Brian, while people are voting, I'm guessing, your team has already been on top of this and making some of these changes to set your clients up for Q4?
Yeah. So one thing that we've done this year, and we do this every year for all of our clients, is we actually develop unique strategies for their assortment. So we'll look at their assortment, we'll look at historical data and understand what levers we want to pull during Q4, which ones have the greatest effect for their product types. Yep. And then we plan towards that. So that's something that we've been doing through the last few months, and now it's time for us to actually execute on those plans.
That makes sense. Perfect. Looks like most people have voted, so let me share those results. So you guys can all see it on your screen as well, but it looks like a lot of you have started thinking about it, but haven't necessarily planned it out. Some of you are ahead of the game and have plans. And then some people, this is a great webinar to be on if you haven't started thinking about those strategies yet or what to expect in Q4. Great, so let me hide that. And we'll go into our holiday season checklist. So Caroline, what can we expect or what should people be thinking about in October? Betsy, what can people be thinking about in October?
Yeah, no worries. So this is more so the biggest takeaway. If you guys take anything away from today's webinar, I would say it's this slide right here, just giving you easy guidelines on what to look at, pretty high level for just making sure that your strategy is in check for Q4. We want to make sure inventory and everything is getting ready in October. Then we're getting more aggressive and ready to execute in November, and doubling down in December, making sure we're getting those last minute sales, and then preparing for the end is near in January, and how we can analyze the performance and use it to forecast for next year.
Perfect. So speaking of October, we're in it right now. What is everyone going to be doing, Betsy?
Yeah, so starting with our inventory strategy, ideally we want to make sure that we can forecast our inventory correctly. So we want to look at historical sales and make sure that we can prepare to have that same level of inventory on hand. Or if we're starting to see sales rate or sales volume increase year over year, obviously that would be a great thing for a lot of our sellers, but making sure we can have that inventory available to us, whether that's writing purchase orders or getting manufacturing going for a lot of your products. And then also making sure that these products are optimized, that their listings are in check, and that we have differentiating details to separate our products out from competitors.
Perfect. So Brian, what kind of inventory strategies are you sharing with your clients?
Yeah, so this ties all the way back into our plans for each of our clients. So we do the same exact thing with looking at historical sales for them and forecasting out based on that. But one of the things that we do that we find is commonly missed is actually understanding what your advertising activities are going to do and what effect that's going to have on your inventory. So we also look at if we're going to be running lightning deals, best deals, coupons, or any type of promotions, and what effect that may have on inventory, because historical sales and data may not include that. So that's something that we also look to factor in as well.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think you were talking about factoring some of your promotional calendars in as well, right?
Yeah, because if you're running a lightning deal this year and you didn't run one last year, the data that you're looking at from last year is not really going to paint that picture for you. So making sure that after you do that, you account for all of those things in your calendar that you're going to plan on running through Q4.
Yeah, that's a great data. So make a marketing calendar for yourself and then line up your your inventory strategies under that as well your ad strategies.
Yeah, you'll want to make sure that you can keep inventory on hand if you have more traffic coming in from those ads and promotions.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. So, like having the inventory on hand, you want to make sure that the content for the inventory is, the most relevant that it can be. You want to have really great images of your products, as many images as you probably can, even some lifestyle images in there, making sure your product titles are really relevant and they include all of the necessary information about your product and including that also in the bullet points and description, and definitely using that enhanced brand content. That's a great place that consumers actually look at, more specifications about the product to really be able to understand it and their use of it. So I would definitely make sure that you have all of the relevant information about your products.
So Brian, I know we've been touching upon this, but do you offer holiday-specific strategy for content pages and what kind of content to include?
Yeah, so on the actual content page, we really look at keywords on the back end of that, but also another thing that we'll look at is the enhanced brand content and featuring other products. So with the influx of traffic, using the new comparison table that they have in enhanced brand, that can really drive a lot of awareness for other products inside of your catalog. So that's something that we look for opportunities when we're going through product detail pages.
Got it.
But also another thing that we look at too here is stores, and that's where we focus a lot of our efforts on for the holidays is how can we utilize stores to curate a customer experience where we're going to display all of the promotions, display all of the coupons that we're going to run through the year to make it easier for consumers to find the values that we're providing.
And the stores were a feature that were launched, I believe, last holiday season, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So it's definitely relatively new territory, especially for the holiday season. So it's a good way to use it, almost mimicking what a lot of retail stores do, which is invest in their storefronts and make a big event out of that. So kind of mimic some of those traditional brick and mortar retail strategies into your Amazon storefronts.
Yeah.
Perfect. And then what's everyone doing for advertising in October, Betsy? Or should they be doing? Or Caroline? Yep.
Yeah, so for October, you're going to want to be sure that all of your products are being advertised and that they're all set up in campaigns. As Brian had mentioned a bit before, you're going to want to keep in mind that your content will be directly impacting all of your ad performance. So it's really important to be sure that all of your content is updated. It's also a good idea at this time as well to start to take advantage of sponsored brands to complete your ad strategy. So sponsored brands show up at the top of the page, and they're a great way to open up that ad funnel. You're also going to want to use your best performing search terms to advertise your best selling products. So keep in mind too that Amazon takes 14 days to process the sponsored brands data. So you're going to want to start this early. And there are also different tests that you can run with these. So Brian, what are some of the tests that you advise for different ad performance?
Yeah, so this is probably one of the most important parts about sponsored brands, and that's really focusing around your call to action, the landing page that they're getting. So do you want to curate a landing page with only select offers, or do you want to drive them directly into your Amazon store? That's something that you're going to want to A/B test, but also what are the 4 products that are displayed? Sometimes displaying your logo there, if you have brand equity, can really show confidence to that consumer. And then putting your most popular products in those 3 additional image slots can also drive additional awareness to top sellers. So those are things that you're going to want to test out over October and the early part of November to really key into which setup is going to drive the best level of conversions for you in Q4.
Yeah, that's a good point. So now is the time to do your testing. So going into November and December, which we'll touch upon more, you have your best performing options ready to go.
Yeah, we actually had a question from one of our sellers asking if they don't sell a holiday item, how can they benefit from some of the extra online traffic in Q4? And I think that advertising in general is a great way for, you guys to pick up on the extra traffic that's coming in, even starting now. People start thinking about their holiday shopping as early as October. And if you can put yourself in a competitive position with your advertising, helping you build your sales rank organically from getting more sales from ads, then that's only going to put you in a better position as we get closer to the December holidays.
Yeah.
And almost regardless of what you sell,
yeah, and
like
some ways, if you don't have a holiday product, you're almost at an advantage as far as the cost of clicks maybe not getting driven up as much as a holiday item. So continue advertising. You shouldn't see too much of an uptick in CPC like some other categories might, because the audience is still there. I know when I go to shop for presents or gifts for holidays, I inevitably will purchase something for myself. So just because it's holiday season doesn't mean that shoppers are only looking for, gift items or holiday items. They're going to be looking for anything that they need as well. So continue advertising, and you shouldn't, see the same increase in CPC. So you might be in a better position than some holiday product.
Exactly.
Any thoughts to add to that, Brian?
No, we've actually seen the same exact thing. And really the one thing that I've noticed over the last few years that has been tied to that has been the price point. So if you're not really a seasonal item, but you have a lower price point, you do seem to get an influx on those premium shopping days like Prime Day, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, exactly for the same reason you guys just mentioned. People are already on the platform and they still need to buy that item, so they just add it to their cart since they're already there.
Yep.
Awesome.
And then what can you expect with Q4 October performance?
Yeah, so keeping in mind that we're not in December right now. We don't have that need to get that item to us in 2 days. So a lot of the customers looking around don't necessarily have the intent to buy right now, but are just kind of shopping around. So a lot of the searches, you're going to have this higher search volume kind of starting to ramp up, but people are not really going to be making a decision. So metrics to watch during this time, it's going to be a lot of impressions, clicks, but not necessarily focusing on conversions and ACoS during this time.
Yep. But as you head into November, some of these other metrics become important. But before we give you your strategies for November, I'm going to hold you hostage with another poll.
We gotta know.
We just want to know if this is your first holiday season. So you can let us know if this is your first holiday season ever, if it's your first holiday season on Amazon, maybe you have a different e-commerce or retail background. If you've never been through this before, you're just here to get all the information, let us know. And keep those questions coming in. Pat and Megan are online answering those. And I know they're seeing some good ones that they're sharing with us as well. Looks like most people. So Brian, while people are voting on this one, I'll get your thoughts again. So I know you work with a wide variety of clients. Do you usually see new sellers joining Amazon during this time? I know I said earlier, there's an increased seller competition. Have you seen that in your experience?
Yeah, surprisingly enough, we see people entering the platform every month of the year.
Yeah.
We would expect that you wouldn't see somebody necessarily launching in Q4, but we've actually seen some success with brands launching in Q4 and capitalizing on the increased traffic.
Yeah.
The one thing though that I will say with that is that most of those people generally have to expect to come in pretty aggressively if you're entering the market in Q4. But
yeah, you would need more like capital and marketing investment, right?
Yeah, but you can definitely benefit from it, and you can see that carry over into the first quarter and second quarter and through the next year.
Perfect. So I'm going to close this poll and share the results. So it looks like most people have been through one holiday season. Some people have been through multiple. So that's great. Some of you have experienced this before, but Amazon's kind of a dynamic marketplace, so one year doesn't necessarily translate exactly into the next one. Perfect. So with that in mind, let's go into we'll start with inventory strategies, but we'll have some other strategies coming up as well.
Yeah, so your inventory strategy for November, I think, is entirely reliant on Black Friday and Cyber Monday. So in order to get your inventory in for those big shopping days in November, you'll want to have it in by November 5th so you can capitalize with that. And this is going to be important because this is where a lot of that volume is coming in. We just finished up Thanksgiving dinner, everybody jumps on their laptops and starts buying things from Amazon on Black Friday. So this is an inventory to get into FBA. I know, Brian, you mentioned I think yesterday when we connected about what you can do if you're not FBA. So what strategies would you recommend to sellers who aren't selling FBA?
So yeah, if you're not selling an FBA, some of the things that you're going to want to look at, or even if you're using FBA but you can fulfill it yourself in case of stockouts, but you're going to want to look at potentially capitalizing on seller fulfilled Prime if you're eligible, and really understanding what your fulfillment and logistical challenges are. So that way, if let's say you are using FBA in an FBM model and you stock out of FBA, you can convert that over to seller fulfilled Prime and not miss out on opportunities. But also too, if you only sell and ship the products yourself, you can utilize seller fulfilled Prime to gain that Prime badge and increase your volume in Q4.
And for seller fulfilled Prime, you could get started today, right? Seeing if you're eligible and making sure that badge is in place for the holiday season.
Yep. Yeah, they have a pretty easy trial to get set up and going with. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward to get through. We normally can get most of our clients up within 7 days up and running.
Okay.
That includes integrating in and figuring out the process and everything.
Perfect. Yeah, so it seems like that's something people should start looking into now if they want to have those dual fulfillment methods. It can't hurt, certainly, to be able to fulfill that listing if you run out in one place with another. With that in mind, so this is holiday shipping suggestions for November, but this is for sellers shipping to FBA, to Amazon, right? Just to clarify, not shipping to your end customer.
Yeah, so you'll want to allow a lot of time for this to happen. Shipping can take time, especially with the increased volume of people trying to get products into FBA, and just really plan this out because you can even assume that your shipment is going to the fulfillment center across the country. So there are even higher processing times, but these are just some things to keep in mind when you're making these shipping decisions, just to make sure that you guys are in the best situation that you can be to capitalize on those important holidays for shopping.
Yeah, I saw this last year, the year before. I've been through a couple of holiday seasons. There's always a backup. So Amazon does publish those deadlines, but even so, you want to send it in as early as you possibly can to make sure that your products are on the shelf and available to sell.
Exactly.
And then what are sellers doing with pricing?
Yeah, so you'll want to make sure that you are priced to competitively. You guys want to sell through product, you guys want to increase your sales volume. So another strategy to do that other than advertising is going to be to make sure that you can be priced competitively. So we recommend testing all kinds of different price options that you have available to you. Definitely if you have restrictions, like using MAP pricing or MSRP, that's another thing. But if you do have the ability to test pricing, you'll want to test based on your conversion rates and do a lot of this before we get to those big holidays so that we know where we can price competitively to win on those big holidays. And just kind of like what you were saying before, Brian, even if you don't have a holiday product, if you're a low price for that specific product, then people who are shopping, maybe they are looking for low price paper towels and we'll just throw them in the cart too and go through with the sale.
And then what other pricing strategies are you implementing with your clients, Brian?
So really, you guys nailed it. For the most part, it's adjusting the pricing and seeing how the conversion rates are affected by it. One of the most interesting things that we always find surprising, though, is that you can improve your conversion rates sometimes by raising your price. It's not always going to work, but sometimes having that price can actually improve it. So definitely
motivated shoppers potentially that are driving to your page.
Yeah, it shows more because at some point with certain products, if your price is too low versus everybody else, then they start to believe that the quality isn't quite there. So pricing it effectively versus your content and how your product detail page is set up and how your reviews are can really help drive further conversions. But you have to try it out.
Yeah, that's a good point. You want to figure out what your product market fit is and how you want to position your product. Is it a premium offering? Are you going for the volume game here? What does your competition look like? And, can they sustain better margins than you can? So it's about positioning your product and proving value to your seller at a higher price point, potentially by using your reviews or ratings that are better than competitors.
Yeah, definitely. So another thing that can probably influence your pricing strategy is how much inventory do you have on hand? You guys, if you have way too much inventory, you might even want to think about lowering that price so you can just sell through it and you won't get hit with storage fees after the holiday season when maybe you're not going to be selling as fast. Or if you have too little inventory, hopefully you can sell through that inventory. It might not slow it down too much, but hopefully you can take home more money at the end of the day with having an increased price. So we do have some actionable tips here, looking at your days of inventory and finding out how much you're actually selling and adjusting your price based on how fast you're selling your inventory.
Exactly. So it's important to figure out, do a little forecasting for yourself. Look at your sales rate over the past 30 days, say, and see what it's going to look like for the next 30 or 60 days, adding in the fact that you're potentially going to increase sales volume, so keeping all of that in mind. And as Brian mentioned earlier in the presentation, keeping your marketing promotional activities in mind as well.
Yeah, and one thing too also to add in here is to monitor your competition, because in certain categories and certain product types, you may have limited competition, and if they start to run out of inventory towards the end of the selling season, you can capitalize that on your pricing. So that's something that you'll just want to be aware of as well as you're going through Q4.
Yeah. I have a question from Laura. She wants to know, how long do you suggest we allow the price to run before we check conversions to compare? Do you have a set testing window that you recommend, Brian?
Yeah, really, we look for anywhere from 7 to 14 days, 1 to 2 weeks. The main thing is to keep them consistent, and every time you test the same exact time frames.
Yeah. Okay.
Also just be mindful of any other outside variables or factors that could be making that data look differently, such as a holiday weekend or heavy travel days, things like that.
Interesting.
Yep. Cool. Perfect.
Yep. So we're not leaving pricing strategy just yet. We do have one more thing that can influence your pricing strategy, and that's where your product is in the product life cycle. So this is relative to Q4, but also not Q4, throughout the year. If you're launching new products or you're trying to improve the sales rank on your products, you can try to target a lower price and see how that improves selling through or improving that sales rank. But same with trying to be more profitable on a specific product. With maybe some of your best selling products, if you know that you're not going to lose out on some of your repeat customers, why not try to target a higher price and make yourself a few more dollars at the end of the day?
Or potentially increase your conversion rate.
Exactly.
Perfect. And then in addition to pricing testing, you can also run promotions on Amazon. So you have a few different options. So what are some of the promotions that can be running in addition to your price testing?
Yeah. So we can run coupons, which have an action item where you check if you want to have % off of a specific deal on Amazon. You can run lightning deals, which only last for a specific amount of time. Subscribe and save, which a lot of the sellers that I actually work with here at Teikametrics use subscribe and save, and it's a great way for building that customer lifetime value if you are getting a lot of repeat customers. And it's often with other sellers that I work with who have larger quantity variations of their products, trying to run promotions on those larger quantities so you can really capitalize on the margin that you have there.
Yeah. Brian, do you have a preferred promotion that you suggest that sellers use, or one that you found has the best return?
Yeah, one of the best promotions on this list that we really like to run is lightning deals, and that's mostly due to the halo effect. So having that successful lightning deal can raise your organic sales for the next 2 to 4 weeks afterwards. So that's always nice. But there is some risk to that. But one of the most common promotions that we use, or the two most common, are coupons and tiered promotions. And those are really dependent upon the situation. But they each have their benefits. Like coupons can drive additional traffic, but tiered promotions can increase the cart size. So depending on what your initiatives are and what your goal is for Q4, you'll want to choose between those.
Yeah, and just to clarify for our audience, if you don't know the term cart size, it's basically making sure your average order amount is higher. So if you're doing a tiered promotion for larger quantities, you can tempt the customer into buying a 3-pack instead of a 1-pack or 5-pack, and getting more value into their shopping cart. Versus with coupons, you could potentially use coupons instead of dropping your price. So shoppers might see more perceived value there because they'll see a $2 off that they can clip, or $5 off, versus if you just dropped your price by that amount.
Yeah.
Perfect. And then, of course, we're going to cover ad strategy, and Caroline's going to lead us through ad strategy for November.
Yeah, so for advertising here, you're going to want to put an emphasis on targeting your campaigns to include holiday search terms for the season. An example we used here is Christmas gifts for dad. I always tell sellers I work with too, just to ensure that most, if not all, of their products are being advertised for the entire month, especially as Betsy had mentioned with Black Friday and Cyber Monday. Also, keeping your auto campaigns running during this time is going to be especially important. That's in order to track any changes and also to collect new search terms.
Perfect. And speaking of search terms, Brian, you'd mentioned that there are a couple of key KPIs around this time that you like your clients to keep in mind, that you try to keep in mind, specifically top of search placement. What other metrics are you looking at, and then how are you looking at top of search placement? What kind of decisions are you making?
Yeah, so really what we try and do is based on the strategy, we're looking at either maintaining their presence in the category, or we're actually trying to improve it. So when we're looking at top of search placement, we'll look at the actual report and see what percentage of our impressions are actually being placed in top of search, and we monitor that on the daily basis. So if we start to see that our top of search placement is deteriorating, then we're assuming that competition is getting more aggressive, so we're going to get more aggressive. So that's a really good one to be monitoring, especially if you want to maintain your presence in the space. But also monitoring cost per click and impressions. If you start to see those decline throughout the course of the season, you're most likely being beat out by competition, because really competition should increase as we're going, and impressions should increase up until the last sellable days of the year.
That makes a lot of sense. We have a question from Martin, who wants to know if we're going to go over keyword ideas to target for the holidays. Betsy, do you have any thoughts around that?
Yeah, you know, everything that we do here at Teikametrics is definitely data driven. So if you want to do, we always recommend testing different search terms or even adding some of that content, Christmas gifts for dad, if your product is relevant for that search term, maybe throwing in makes a great Christmas gift in your product description page as we get closer to the holidays. And then you'll start to see if that search term is actually converting for you, in which case that's when we would want you to have it in your holiday centered manual campaign.
Yeah, what that means is basically having a manual campaign dedicated to holiday keywords, whether that's gift related keywords, holiday related keywords. So you can put relevant products in that campaign and target those. Or you could include them in an existing campaign because generally speaking, you're not going to end up spending on them outside of the holiday season. How are you handling targeting holiday keywords, Brian?
Yeah, so we do exactly just that. We'll add in very specific keywords around Christmas, around things like that. But one of the other things that we found around the holidays that's really interesting is actually historically productive keywords. So you may find in your data that there are keywords that were phrase or broad matches that in Q4 they convert really well just because people are trying to shop. But outside of Q4, they may not convert at all. So looking at last year and what worked and what didn't work is something that we do a lot to really build off of our progress that we made the previous year.
I have another question here, and this is about sponsored brands or HSA. Seller wants to know, do you recommend putting holiday or deal language in the CTA text of the headline search ad or sponsored brand ad? Do you have any thoughts on that, Brian?
Yeah, so Amazon actually has a stance against this. Amazon does not like any time-sensitive messaging inside of your call to action on your sponsored brand. And it does go through a review process. There will be times that you can get through that, but for the most part, Amazon does not want that to be there. And that's specifically because you can create a sponsored brand ad, but it doesn't have to end at any point. So they don't want to see Christmas messaging in the March or anything like that.
Okay, got it. That's very important to keep in mind. So I'm not sure who asked this question, but keep that in mind. Don't do it. Perfect. And then going into November, as your sales start to pick up with Black Friday, Cyber Monday, it could potentially mean an increase in number of customers and number of buyers, but that also means you want to make sure you're setting the right expectations.
Right. So, as far as keeping your performance expectations in mind, we want to make sure that your customers have the right expectations of the products that they're buying from you. So making sure that that content all over your page is really relevant to your product. You have really accurate photos of the products that your consumers are buying, just so they have the best, that they know exactly what they're purchasing. And this will actually help us, make sure that our return rate isn't going to be outrageous by, maybe setting the wrong expectation. Like if somebody thought they were buying a backpack, but it turns out it was a backpack for a Barbie doll, that would be, you would probably get a lot of returns for a product like that over the holidays.
Yeah, that's a great point. So the more you can do this, anticipating your customers' needs and questions, the better position you're going to be in. You don't have to worry about having to respond to feedback. You can spend your time elsewhere. Also related to holiday products, Justin has a question around how do you really know if you have a holiday product, which is a great question. Justin, it's easier if you've had a holiday season before because you would have known whether or not you experienced that surge or not. Outside of that, you have some options around testing holiday keywords with your product, see if you can get any traction that way. Have you encountered any products ever, Brian, where maybe you didn't think they were holiday, but they ended up picking up traction in Q4?
Yeah, we actually see this with products that are not necessarily for holiday itself, but the activities around holidays.
Okay.
So items like tables, chairs, things that are going to be used at big feasts or events, those could have uplifts in November, October, things like that, but then fall off in December. That happens all the time. We see that all across the board. One thing that we do to really understand if we're new to that product type is we'll look at Google Trend data, we'll look at competitors' sales rank data throughout the year, and try and see if they're having any changes or if there's anything there that we can gather.
Okay, awesome. So essentially do some research maybe off Amazon to see what you can capture there. Perfect. So that brings us into December. The holiday season is here.
We're getting closer.
We're getting closer. What's happening in December, Betsy?
Yeah, so you'll want to make sure that you still have inventory ready for sale. You know, we went through Black Friday and Cyber Monday, and you likely did probably some of your highest sales days on those days, but the holidays, the December holidays haven't happened yet. And I know I do a lot of crunch time shopping around those December holidays. So you want to make sure that all of your December inventory is in by at least December 1st. These dates that we're showing here are actually from last year because Amazon hasn't released what these dates are going to be for.
Yeah, but imagine they'll
yet.
probably send out a newsletter that they usually do highlighting these kind of dates.
Yeah, I definitely imagine that happening in the next week or two, and that'll give us a better picture of when we need to actually have inventory coming in. But just making sure that that inventory is available for sale so you can really capitalize on those late shoppers like me.
Yeah, I'm very last minute, which is why I'm a Prime member as well.
Exactly.
Perfect. And then, of course, with December, there's also going to be a pricing component. And there's some strategies you can implement, right?
Yeah.
Betsy?
So just like you were saying, Brian, before, you know, we want to make sure that we're priced really competitively against our top competitors. So in order for us to capture all of those last minute shoppers like me, you know, I'm going to go for the product that has the lowest price. So you'll want to make sure that that's your product that has the lowest price compared to its competitors, and really push that inventory as much as you can, because the holidays are coming to a close after December. So you'll want to make sure that you are doing that, but also, you know, choosing between your heavy advertising and your pricing strategy. Because at the end of the day, we do want you to be profitable throughout the holidays, and making sure that your gross margin isn't taking too much of a hit.
Yeah, Brian, we were talking about this before. You'd mentioned implementing a pricing strategy based on what the product needs. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, it's really based off of what you're seeing with your competitors and what's happening there. What we've seen with some products and some product types is that there's limited competition and they'll just run out of stock. And you can adjust your pricing to take advantage of those opportunities. So monitoring that, but also the other thing is monitoring your inventory. If you're having a slower season than you may want to get more aggressive with your pricing during this period of time to try and increase that sell-through and try and get that inventory out before you start getting hit with monthly storage fees.
Perfect. Yeah, and that's important to keep in mind, especially because long-term storage fees are now charged on a monthly basis as well. So over ordering for the holidays and getting stuck with inventory can really impact your January numbers.
Yeah.
Perfect. And then this is kind of based on what Brian just touched upon. So monitor your competition, look for when your competitors are potentially going to be out of stock or are out of stock. So it requires some close monitoring on your part.
Definitely. You want to keep a close eye on that and really identify those places where you can really capitalize over your competition.
Yep. And then what about sellers that have buy box competition, Brian? Do you encounter that much with your clients?
Yeah, luckily that's one of the things that we don't encounter a lot. We help a lot of our sellers implement MAP and internet selling agreements. But when we do run into that, we always suggest the use of a repricer.
Okay.
In most cases, for clients or for people who are dependent on Q4, repricing during this time of the year is your make or break it kind of strategy. So that's something that we always suggest.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So if you are a reseller, a repricer is the way to go. You just want to make sure that when you're in the buy box, you're converting as much as possible. So that could be, you know, through advertising, through other promotions as well. So going into December, we have a couple of slides on advertising strategy here. Do you want to talk us through that, Caroline?
Yeah. So in addition to being really aggressive, you're going to want to also be really competitive this month. So if you're using Teikametrics, what that means for you is bumping up your bids and setting aggressive ACoS targets. Your competitors are going to be advertising during this time period as well. So you're going to want to be competing with them to win last minute customers, especially Prime members. And Prime members are able to place orders for Christmas up until December 22nd.
It's a good point. So you want to be looking at your competitors. You want to be targeting them as well. During this time, Brian, how are you handling sponsored products versus sponsored brands or HSA? How are you splitting your investment here?
So how we look at it is we look at sponsor brands for kind of the best of the best for our keywords. And that's solely due to the placement of them. Since they're very accessible, we see generally higher click-through rates, which then can lead to lower conversions if your targeting is not specific. So we'll segment our efforts on any keyword that we operate within the top percentage of our sponsored ads.
Okay.
Anything for sponsored product ads, yeah, we'll just push it through and monitor the placement, cost per clicks, and impressions throughout the quarter. But we get more aggressive with how often we're monitoring. So we'll be looking at ads nearly every day and making adjustments because every day matters during this time.
Yeah, for sure. I have a question here from Michael, and he says he's averaging around 1 unit per week. Would you suggest an advertising strategy with such a small volume? My recommendation, Michael, would be to start, if you're going to invest in advertising, start with sponsored products. I don't think you'd be ready for sponsored brands yet at that volume, and it could be stretching yourself a little too thin, stretching your budget too far. So if you're going to test advertising, I would start with sponsored products. Even with low volume, it's not necessarily a huge risk if you're managing your budgets and changing your bids, because you could see whether there's demand there and whether people are searching and finding your product.
Yeah, definitely kind of just doing what you can with what you have. You know, if you have limited budget to work with advertising, definitely get started with it because it's a great way to just have more customer data about how people can search for your products.
Yeah, think about it as investing in data, if not in sales volume. Do you have any thoughts on that, Brian?
Yeah, in addition to that, I would say also look at really what, with the data that you have, try and understand what the issue necessarily could be with the product. Are you having a problem driving traffic to the product, or are you having a problem on the conversion side of things? Because it could come down to that. Yeah. But also, well, look at other opportunities like coupons, giveaways, any other advertising lever that maybe doesn't have as much of an upfront cost if you have a limited budget.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But kind of leading off of budget for December, we see a lot of people kind of recommend in some instances doubling down on advertising, right?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of people still out there shopping, and you want to make sure that you can be in the best position possible and be able to put your products in front of all of those people. So really starting to invest, or not starting, but really continuing to invest in your advertising through December is only going to help you do this and be able to capture all of those people who are still out there shopping and making sure that you're putting your products in the best position possible.
Exactly. But kind of the counterpoint to this, Brian, is there a time when you would maybe want to scale back or pull back advertising?
Yeah, that's actually a really good call out there. So if your FBA, as you noted earlier, December 22nd is really that last day. That's going to be your last shippable day. But if you're not utilizing FBA, understand what your logistical timeline is, what your lead times are, what your shipping windows are, and know when Amazon's going to start displaying in red that it will not arrive before Christmas.
Yeah.
So everybody, I'm sure, has seen that. But yeah, once that starts happening, that's when you want to start pulling off your advertising, because really it's all about timing. And if people can't get the product guaranteed to their door by Christmas, they're not going to purchase at this time of the year.
Yep.
So just be mindful of that.
Yeah, that's a great point. And if I see that, that's when I start sending everyone gift cards, which is usually my go-to anyway, because I always leave it to the last minute. So don't be like me, plan ahead. Perfect. And then going back to ACOS targets, Caroline, you touched upon that earlier. How are you reviewing them?
Yeah, so for ACOS targets, again, you're going to want to be really aggressive just based on the increased volume and in order to win those last minute shoppers this month. A lot of sellers that I work with, regardless of whether their business is in the launch, growth, or profitability phase, are going to want to go back and revisit the launch phase ACOS targets here.
Yep. So for some of you maybe unfamiliar with our product, you essentially want to think about reinvesting in marketing for the holiday season. So even if it's a product that's been selling for a while, you're not necessarily launching it brand new, but it could be new shoppers and new buyers on Amazon that haven't encountered it before. Mm-hmm. So think about launching it to them and to that new subset of shoppers.
Right. And even just looking where under it says launch on that side, generating exposure, sales rank, and driving new traffic, all of those are objectives that you'd want to have through December.
Exactly. And think about how this is going to feed into your overall business as well. So your ad spend here and feeding it into your overall business, overall sales volume, not just the ad sales portion of it. But while you're investing in advertising, you're deducting from your bottom line, right? That's just how it works.
How it works.
So how should people be looking at gross margin and gross profit, Betsy?
Yeah, so you want to be aware of these numbers. Amazon doesn't give you a great way to actually measure these numbers, but it's really important that you guys are taking into account, all of those fees that Amazon is taking, the FBA fees, the Amazon commission fees, and also how your advertising spend is cutting into this. So, thinking of these as your cost of selling is both your cost of goods sold and those fees that you have to pay for Amazon and your ad spend. You have to pay to play in a lot of categories to get yourself ranked. And all of these things are going to be deducted from your selling price. So keeping this in mind when you're doing your advertising strategy and also if you're changing your pricing strategy.
Exactly. So keep in mind all of these things that are going into your business and keep, if you want to be profitable, there are some opportunity costs to that. It could potentially be sacrificing sales volume, reducing ad spend, et cetera, to get to the higher margin or profit number. But the other way to also look at it is your ad spend against your total revenue, right? We call it tacos.
Tacos.
Here at Teikametrics, it's called tacos, your total advertising cost of sale. Keep that in mind as well. So your ACoS is your ad spend against ad sales. Your tacos, your ad spend against total sales or total revenue.
Yeah, so making sure that number is steadily decreasing, that your advertising is actually doing a lot of the heavy lifting of what we're saying, increasing your sales rank and helping you boost your organic sales.
Yep, so not just ACoS, but your tacos, which is your total ACoS.
Yes.
And of course, we're in the business here, of e-commerce and selling to customers. So whether it's online or brick or mortar, you want to provide excellent customer service, right?
Yep. Just to always help out that return rate. You want to make sure in January when you come in that your customers were happy with what they bought and that you did the best that you could to avoid getting that influx of returns.
Yeah, and it's also a way for you to extend LTV, right? So LTV being lifetime value. So you could have encountered a new buyer for the first time who's never seen your product before. But providing that extra service and the right information can potentially make them a return buyer. And Brian, generally in my experience, return buyer is less cost of acquisition for you as a business, and they keep coming back. I know it's hard to track in Amazon specifically, but are there any other notes on just customer service and follow through that you'd want to share?
I think really the main thing is to do exactly these things. If a customer does have an issue, you want to provide the best customer service possible and just make them happy. Even if necessarily you might have to take the product back at a loss. It's really important during this time of year to make that good impression on the consumer, and doing the right thing that makes them happy will have a bigger, longer term impact than worrying about the profit on that one individual transaction.
Exactly. That's a great point to make. So again, think holistically. It's easy to get down into the details and the numbers, but think about holistically and the impact of this one decision on your overall business.
Yeah.
Perfect. That leads us into January. So we're getting into Q1 now, but that's also just as important as your Q4 because a lot of what you invested in Q4 can potentially pay out in January.
Definitely.
But once again, before we lead into the information, I have another poll here. So I'm going to launch that right now to see what metrics are most important for you for the holiday season. So I'm going to give people a couple of minutes to vote on that, seeing some responses trickling in. And while we have that poll going, I have a question here from Dennis. do higher priced premium products do well or better in the holidays? We're launching a new product that's in this situation where if we compete on price, we won't be profitable. Do you have any experience with that, Brian?
Really, what we've found with a lot of higher priced premium products, especially if you're going against lower price value products in that category, a lot of it comes down to reviews and how consumers are interacting with it. But also the things to be mindful of is the success is dependent upon how you create the product detail page. So what I would say for that answer, to be the most successful in that situation, I would focus on creating the best experience possible on your product detail page, and just making sure that you try and drive as many reviews to your listing. I know building reviews on Amazon is very difficult currently, but those are the keys to really conveying that higher price value.
Yeah, that's a good point. If you have a higher priced product or premium product, you want to make sure you're investing in telling your brand story so buyers know what's setting you apart. So leverage enhanced brand content, storefronts, all of the tools available where you can sell yourself as a brand and not just a product.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Perfect. So with that, I'm going to close the poll and share some results. So it looks like most people are looking at their gross margin and their gross profit. That's great. So you definitely want to keep your bottom line in mind. Q4 can be really great for top line revenue, but you want to make sure you do take something home at the end of the day and have a gross profit that you can reinvest in other areas of your business. So that's important to see. Not a lot of people concerned with ACOS, which is usually the most popular. That's awesome. That's great to see though. So think about, as we're mentioning, tacos rather than ACOS. Perfect. So that brings us into January. We are almost, toward the end of the scheduled time, but we're going to get through all the content and we have open Q&A at the end. So I encourage everyone to stick around. We'll continue to be here and answer questions.
Yeah, and we'll try to run through the rest of this pretty quickly, but inventory through January, holidays are over, but there's still shoppers out there. So make sure that your products are still available for sale. A lot of people have gift cards and you want to make sure that you get your inventory in for early 2019, approximately by December 17th. Again, still not 100% on that number, but we should have it pretty soon for you guys.
Yeah. And then what are you doing with your ads, Caroline, during January?
Yeah, so like Betsy said, the holidays are over, but people are definitely still shopping. January is a huge time for everyone to go in and spend all the gift cards that they got for the holidays. This is also a time when normal shopping behavior is going to start to level out from the holiday crowd. So it's really important to just use your data from the holidays to put you in a really competitive position for 2019.
It's a good point. In case anyone's wondering, I do enjoy Amazon gift cards as Christmas presents. So if you have me on your list, that's what I want.
Subtle, Gary.
Perfect. And then you also, Betsy, you brought this point up earlier.
Yeah, it's really important to track those returns that you're getting and attribute them back to the sales that happened through November and December, because you don't want to skew your January data with any of the returns coming in. Traditionally, you're going to be doing a lot more in volume, so you can expect a higher rate of return, but just being able to track this number, make sure that it's normal for what you're expected to see for January.
Yeah, and it's also important when you're analyzing January to track your returns back to when the sale happened, right? Otherwise, you're going to end up making your January look really anemic when really it was a December sale that's being returned.
Right.
Do you have any additional thoughts around this, Brian, around handling returns or tracking them?
Yeah, so something else that we look at for returns is also an opportunity to fix issues or clarify things within your listings to consumers. So I recommend looking at the return reasons for those individual products and see what that percentage is, because maybe you need to update your size chart if you're selling an apparel item, or you need to clearly call out that it only includes one item instead of two. So those are the things that you want to look for and try and minimize, not only through the rest of the next year, but also to prep for the next holiday season.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You want to close the feedback loop here. So, the item was returned. You want to try and fix it if you can, but then also use that feedback to add to your content pages and to your product listing.
Yeah.
Great. And then what kind of performance expectations can people expect to see, Betsy?
Yeah, I mean, things are slowing down. We can't expect to see Q4 last forever. So we're going to start to see that back to normal performance start to happen, where now we're going to just have less shoppers come in, and you're going to see, probably fewer impressions, fewer clicks. Really, that traffic is going to slow down. So now metrics to keep in mind and watch are going to be your profitability metrics, your conversion rate, your CPC, and your ACOS, and definitely your tacos too.
Your tacos, yep. And that leads us into the flywheel, right? So we've talked about this concept before in our webinars, which is basically each element of your Amazon business feeds into the other. So your advertising feeds into your overall business, sales feeds into sales rank, which feeds into exposure, which gets you more sales. So these are some of the metrics to keep in mind. Anything to add here, Betsy?
I think you pretty much covered it. It's always important to make sure that you're seeing your advertising spend work efficiently for your whole business.
Yeah.
And you're seeing that wheel start to turn by itself. And the more that we can invest in that advertising and really just making sure that you're making the best decisions for your business, you're going to see your exposure and your rank and your sales eventually start to build on their own.
Yeah, and then potentially impacting your profitability and margins as well.
Exactly.
Perfect. Anything you want to add there, Brian?
Yeah, I think the other thing too here is, especially if you have a brand, this can really help you launching new products. If you start to build buzz around your brand and you get the flywheel moving in that motion, you can see that it would be easier because you can target your branded traffic. You can drive traffic through the store to those new items. So that's something also to just be mindful of.
That's a great point. So you can build up your brand equity here as well.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So that's kind of the end of our content. We have Q&A coming up, but before that, we wanted to give you guys a couple of reminders. We said we'd have a preview of our product. What we're going to have is this link to Teikametrics Flywheel launch that Betsy is going to drop into the chat box right now. So I recommend signing up today, and if you do, you will get an invite to join an exclusive look at the product that's planned for next week. So I highly recommend getting on the launch list for Teikametrics Flywheel. It's our new product that will let you see your advertising in context of your overall business, including those numbers on gross profit and gross margin, which it seems like most of you are looking at for Q4 and holiday season. So we can help you get some insights there. So Betsy's dropped that link.
I sure did.
Perfect. And then, of course, Brian, thank you so much for being here. Brian's also going to be sticking around to answer some questions, but we have a link to Channel Key here if you're interested in any of their services. You could also reach out to us if you have any questions about that, and we'll be happy to help out. Perfect. So we have those two links in there, and then while everyone visits those links and signs up for the launch list, looks up Channel Key, we're going to go through and summarize some of our presentation today, give you some takeaways, and then we'll go right into Q&A.
Yeah, just the key points for every month as we get closer to those December holidays. Where we are in October, you're going to want to start preparing both your inventory and your advertising to make sure that you're in the best place for the holiday season. Going through November, you're going to want to test all of the prices and promotions that you're planning on running and capitalize on those big November holidays where you're going to see the bulk of the shopping really coming in, Black Friday and Cyber Monday. Through December, keep pushing and keep trying to beat out your competitors to capitalize on those last minute shoppers and make sure that you still have inventory available for sale. And through January, use Teikametrics Flywheel to evaluate the holiday season and how this actually impacted your business and what you can expect to see in 2019.
Perfect. So on that note, I'm going to open up the floor for Q&A. So I have some questions here that people have already submitted that I'm going to go ahead and start asking and answering, but please keep those questions coming in. We're going to be sticking around and answering all or most of them. So Ryan has a question. Is there a longer processing time with inventory sent to Amazon for FBA during November? I know we talked about delays in December. Have you noticed anything in November, Betsy or Brian, in your experiences?
I haven't really noticed anything. I can imagine that there is that there would be some delays just because of the volume that's coming in.
Yeah.
But I deal mostly with advertising. I don't know about you, Brian, if you've noticed any delays in shipping around those November holidays.
Yeah, not really anything to call out. You definitely want to plan on an additional few days to a week to be there, but that's more of a safety measure rather than it actually pans out that way. The main thing that we look at, or that we look at this situation, is we'd much rather get the inventory there early than it have an issue and potentially be late.
Right.
That's a good point. Yeah. So keeping, I think it was November 5th was the deadline that we mentioned. So
Yep.
that's the deadline, but you could always get it there ahead of that. Next question is from Laura. She asked, do you recommend doubling down on both manual and automatic campaigns or just the manual? And I believe Laura is referring to the double down slide we had for December strategy.
Yes, she is. You know, I recommend just the products that you're looking to sell through, you know, those are the ones that we want to target. And ideally you have the mirrored structure of running both auto and manual campaigns. And I would take a deeper dive and look into which of these campaigns has the highest conversion rate. You know, I'm assuming through December you've taken the time to build out that manual campaign so it has really good content in it, you know, really good keywords that are representative of your products. So depending on which one has the higher likelihood of converting, you know, that's the one that Amazon's going to want to focus on. So I would definitely push the one with the higher conversion rate.
Okay. Any thoughts on that, Brian?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And one thing that I would also suggest is to just always try and move converting keywords from your automatic to your manual campaign in a set increment. So deciding what that click threshold is or what that conversion rate threshold is to move it over. But yeah, from there, whichever one is converting the most, ideally, it's the manual. That's the one that you want to go after, but it could be different for your campaigns.
Yeah, and then the automatic is potentially going to be a great exploration tool as well. So if not your highest volume, it can give you some of those new searches that maybe have a seasonal shelf life, but could help you maximize a little bit more. Exactly, in Q4.
Yeah. That, and as well as the automatic is also good for placing your ads inside of competitor product detail
that's
pages.
A great point. Yeah, so you can have your ads show up on your competitors' listing pages with automatics as well. That's a great point. Yep. Next question is from Dennis, and he wants to know if we can make more recommendations on holiday-themed keywords that work.
You know, what works for you is probably going to be different than what works for seller A and seller B, Dennis. So, you know, I want you to make sure that you're looking at the data that you can have, that you can find. And if you're willing to test, you know, holiday gifts or holiday gifts for dad and holiday gifts for mom, I definitely think that that's worth investing in, especially as we get closer to the holidays. But I wouldn't make any suggestions, or I can't make any suggestions without the data in front of me about what's going to work best for you.
Yeah, in general, in this kind of scenario, I always default to use an automatic campaign. That's going to tell you what is and isn't converting for you, and then you could add that to your manuals for that doubling down.
Exactly.
Next question is from Michael. He wants to know, what do you think are the most crucial points in increasing your rank? Do you have any thoughts on that, Brian?
Yeah, really the one thing that we focus on the most when we're trying to improve rank is conversions. So conversions plus sales, of course, but really if we can maintain sales but increase conversion, you should start to see that. So those are the two things that we focus on.
That's a good point. So your sales volume as well as just your conversion rate are where you want to be focusing your efforts.
Yep.
Perfect. And then the next question is, let's see, it's from Yakov, who wants to know, how do I plan an advertising budget? So I encounter quite a few budgetary questions. It's a hard decision to make sometimes, especially if you've never established a marketing budget to start off with. What do you recommend sellers do in this instance, Brian? How are you handling it for your clients as far as suggesting budgets?
So we try and look at as much data as we can pull together. So we'll look at trend data, we'll look at historical data and potential competitors and try and estimate what they're doing. The main thing that I will say though, then that we tell all of our clients is if it's your first holiday season, to go in with an open mind and be willing to test things out, because really you're trying to understand what's going to work and what's not going to work, and just define what that dollar amount is that you're comfortable with. But from a rule of thumb, you should expect to 2x, 3x increase versus Q3 if you have a seasonal product. But yeah, really, if it's your first holiday season, I would go in with an open mind and just set aside a budget and try and understand what's working, so that way you can plan more so for next year.
Yeah, and the good thing with like a pay-per-click model like Amazon uses is you're not necessarily going to exhaust your budget. The danger is in under budgeting and running out. But so I would set it maybe a little bit above what you're planning to spend. That way you don't end up exhausting your budget, running out too quickly.
Yeah. Yep. Good call out.
Perfect. So the next question we have is from Joseph, who wants to know, is Q4 a bad moment to launch a product? Because in order to rank, I need to do giveaways, but the number of giveaways may rise due to high competition. What are your thoughts on launching a product in Q4? Brian, I know you said you've had some sellers and some clients see success with that. Do you have any recommendations one way or the other?
I would prefer actually launching more in September, October, and allowing that period to ramp up before Q4 kicks off. That would be my recommendation.
Okay.
Just because you can use those 2 months to 2.5 months to really utilize the giveaways, utilize other levers, and try and position it properly before the increase in searches.
That's a really good point. So Joseph, I guess if you are launching a product, today would be when you want to get started on that. Sooner the better, versus launching it in November or December.
Yep.
Perfect. Next question comes from James, and he is wondering if you recommend pulling any analytics from Google or any other marketplaces. What kind of data points? I know you'd alluded to this earlier, Brian, I think around finding holiday search terms, if I'm not mistaken. Are there any other scenarios where you've used off Amazon data?
Yeah, we use it all the time, and really what we use off Amazon data is to compare and contrast. So it's not necessarily that we're looking at like Google trend data and saying, okay, well, this is what's going to work on Amazon. But what you really want to try and understand with it is it painting a picture, and is it worth trying out on Amazon?
Okay.
Not everything translates over directly from marketplace to marketplace, but it's worth giving it a shot. And if you have data from other sources, then you have a good reason to actually try it.
That's a good point. So it can't hurt to look at that data and see if there is anything that you can leverage for your Amazon advertising or Amazon business.
Yep.
Perfect. And then Ryan has a question. Again, going off Amazon a little bit, have you found it effective to use Facebook or Instagram ads to drive traffic to your Amazon products? Do you have any experience with that, Brian, setting up retargeting campaigns, maybe on Instagram or Facebook?
So that's actually one of the things that we don't do directly, but we work with some partners on that. And really, it's a long process. And the only way to really, that we found it to be effective has been by testing and measuring. So if you do that, you'll want to drive the traffic to an Amazon store. You're going to want to create a social tag, and you're going to want to actually measure each of those campaigns' results. We have found success while going through that process for some of our clients.
Yeah.
But really, it's a longer process to go through all of that.
Gotcha. Yeah, and there's other elements that are kind of particular to an Instagram or Facebook ecosystem, finding influencers, partnering with them, which is a popular way to leverage Instagram. So it will require some research on your end, reaching out to all of these influencers, giving them your products, things like that. So it's quite an investment to build up the Instagram, Facebook presence. But as far as using ads, make sure if you're implementing them, I guess, driving them to your Amazon store. Right, Brian?
Yeah, you definitely want to make sure if you're doing any of those off Amazon efforts to drive back to Amazon, that you have a way to measure it.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I would say in addition to that, you want to make sure you have all of those brand implements in place on Amazon as well. So if someone encounters your brand on Instagram or on Facebook, you're able to tell the same story on Amazon through enhanced brand content or through Amazon storefront.
Yeah, very good point. It's really important to keep that brand, your brand image consistent and cohesive across the different platforms.
Yep, absolutely. And then I have a question here. If we don't sell a holiday item, can we still benefit somehow from the extra online traffic in Q4? I think we addressed this maybe in a different version earlier, around continuing to advertise, because there are also going to be people shopping for gifts, but also people shopping for themselves. So it can't hurt to continue using advertise to leverage that extra traffic. All right, so I'm not seeing any additional new questions coming in. So I think we can get started wrapping up here. But if anyone thinks of any other questions, definitely reach out to our team here. We'd also like to invite you to our next webinar, which is continuing our Q4 Masterclass series. We're going to be doing 10 last-minute strategies to get the most out of your holiday season on Amazon. So that's going to be the end of this month, which weirdly enough is already last minute for the holiday season on Amazon. So things ramp up really quickly, so it's good to stay on top of it. We look forward to seeing a lot of you on there as well. And thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much, Brian, for your expertise and for joining us today as well.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks everyone for coming out. We're going to wrap up here, but if you think of any other questions, definitely reach out to the team as well. Thank you.
Thanks, guys, for tuning in.